for the cable was working, and everything now is back in repair. So and we left off with Senator Limtiarco, and so I'm going to give you the opportunity now to speak on Bill 108.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on Bill 108. And prior to the technical difficulties, I was explaining that I want to commend the author for trying to pursue this bill and the intent of this bill in order to limit the amount of municipal solid waste going to our Liaison landfill. And what that will do in turn will be to extend the life of the cells and decrease the costs over the life of the landfill. However, I do want to raise some concerns that I have in regards to the bill, because although I believe the intent of the bill is right on track and we should pursue it, there are some issues that I have with the bill that our constituents should be aware of in the listening audience, and as well as our colleagues here, to weigh in on the matters on some of the effects that what's in the current bill as introduced and as substituted twice by the committee I just want to bring to the attention. And in the first section of the bill on page 2, there's a reference to on line 17 through 19, and it references the deposit for the beverage container. And it says that the deposit beverage container fee shall be based on the following formula: redemption rate plus the handling fee plus the department's administrative costs. And so I know in what I believe that this it attempts to do is the redemption rate is to give back to the customer that put in the deposit fees, and that they're attempting to redeem that a portion of that deposit fee called the redemption rate in order to get back some of the money that they were charged for that recyclable container. And then there's a handling fee that's going to be charged to that consumer that they will not get back, that's going to go to pay the redemption centers. And then there's a department administrative cost that's going to be charged to the customer that they will not get back, that's going to help those fees are going to go towards administering the program. And so when we look at those fees, nowhere in the bill does it refer to what the handling fee will be or the department's administrative costs will be. It does reference in one of the pages what the redemption rate would be. And right now, I believe that redemption rate, as it's indicated on page 5, that the redemption rate it's pegged at 5 cents. And so one of the issues I have is that we need to make sure that the consumers understand that the deposit fees that they're being assessed, they're not getting all of that back. They're only getting a portion of that back. And it's important that the consumers know, because they're going to pay for it, and they're not going to get that back. And so the consumers need to be aware that they're going to be charged not only for these fees, but also the cost to the retailers to administer their end of the program, because they have to pay in order to get these redemption language put on these recyclable listed containers. And that's going to drive costs into the beverage. Now, it might not be significant, but still, the consumer should know what the effect of this bill is going to do to some of these containers that are on the list of approved containers. Then there's a cost to sustain the redemption centers, and it's not clear how many redemption centers there are, or whether or not some of these redemption centers have to go through some kind of certification process or approval process. But the cost to sustain the redemption centers is built into that handling fee, right? So that handling fee is going to go towards the, I believe those handling fees are going to the redemption centers. And and when I was thinking through that whole process, and discussing with EPA as well as the author of the bill, I wasn't clear as to what sort of controls are going to be placed on these, on how it's accounted for. Because if I have a bag of 10 bottles that I'm bringing into the redemption center, and I give that to the redemption center and they give me a receipt for it, then the redemption center takes it to the EPA or the department that's in charge in order to redeem their handling fee, how are we going to ensure that there's the proper controls to make sure that we're not paying out more than what was actually redeemed? And typically, right, when you go into a grocery store, you see the cashier, they're scanning all of the product, and they keep track of all the barcodes, and those barcodes come up on the register, and that's what you're paying for, and it has a way of tracking it. And it prints you out a receipt of what you purchased, and you walk away with all of that. I don't see a redemption center putting that type of technology to track all of the barcodes into each one of these containers, or whether or not it even exists, and whether that handling fee is going to cover all of the investment that the redemption center will need in order to establish that. But more importantly, that the system of abuse, or a system, the current system as I see it, because I do recycle my plastics already as well as my aluminum, and I don't see that system at any of the redemption centers that I take them to currently. So I'm concerned that could kind of eat away at whatever money is being put into this fund in order to support the program. So I do have my concerns on the redemption center and how those redemption centers are going to be managed. And then, of course, the cost for the government of Guam to regulate and administer the program, once again, being subsidized by the consumer and not actually getting any of that money back except for the portion of the redemption fee. And so, the question has to be asked, right? How will the redemption centers track the bottles, and how will you prevent that potential fraud from occurring? Because, they're going to go in to redeem their handling fees, and really, we're going to have to, provided we put some sort of real good systems of controls, and we're talking like automated systems, right? Some sort of IT systems in order to track it. And unless we put that infrastructure in place, what are we going to be accepting? Handwritten receipts of in order to redeem their handling fees? So we got to think through whether or not that process has been developed enough in order to pursue what this bill is intending to do. And I know that there are several states that do this, and once again, the author is on the right track of pursuing this, but we really do need to maybe take a step back and make sure that we have it right before we pursue it, because we're back to this point in time in which we're amending the existing law because we didn't do the due diligence the first time, right? So that's why we're trying to fix it. And I'm worried that we're still not quite there yet. But 11 states right now have these deposit fees, and I understand that at one point in time there were over 40. But states have moved away from that because they have mature recycling programs, and it kind of just, the private sector kind of takes care of itself. And that's because there's a market for those recyclable items in those states, and that's why you see a decrease in the states that were participating in it, because now it makes some financial sense to recycle these materials, and there's a market for the materials for them to sell, and that's how they recover the investment that they put into it. And so that kind of leads me into my next topic of discussion as to whether or not we have those mature markets on the recycling side, whether we actually can take these recyclable products and make use of them on our island. And the short answer that I believe exists is that because we don't have any real manufacturing, there isn't that economically feasible means of recycling this product. What we currently do now is we ship it off island, and it's quite expensive to do. So for example, heavy metal steel is recycled probably predominantly on Guam because there's markets in Asia for them to purchase the steel and melt it back down and produce something else. That exists for the aluminum cans as well. But glass, for example, I'm not sure that that's going to be an economically feasible item in order to charge our consumers now for it, knowing that on island, right, there exists no real way of recycling glass bottles, nor is there an economically feasible way to sell it off island. So I know that the author had the foresight to see that that's true, and so on page 3, on line 7, they have this item that says it's the list of approved containers, and the bill, shows that they've at least thought of this and put in the list of approved containers means a list compiled by the board of approved containers identified for recycling deposits. Containers may be placed upon this list, containers may not be placed upon this list unless a process to recycle, reuse, convert to energy, or physically remove containers from Guam has been established or will be established concurrent with placement upon said list. And so, my concerns with those sections of the bill is that we haven't clearly defined what we're considering recycling, reusing. Obviously, there's a means to physically remove everything from the island, but is it economically feasible? And is there a true market for it where, it makes sense to ship this stuff off island? Is there any return? Or is it just going to end up piling up here and is going to find its way to the landfill anyway? So, my first amendment, Madam Speaker, is on page 3, line 9. I'd like to add the following language where it says, placed upon the list unless, and add the following language, an economically viable process to recycle, reuse, convert to energy, or physically remove containers from Guam has been established. And the reason for the amendment is, for example, I could take a couple of bottles and I could reuse them as planters for seedlings. I don't think that's the intent of this bill. I don't want to be charged a deposit fee for something that I'm going to use based on the fact that I could reuse it for another purpose other than, something that's a business could economically, sustain by recycling these goods. So by inserting the language of economically viable, I think it's trying to say, hey, there's got to be a market out there for, let's say, aluminum, for example. There's a market for aluminum that exists already, and it makes sense right now to ship it off the island and to recycle it. Okay, so aluminum containers can go upon this list of approved containers and be charged these fees. But glass, for example, probably shouldn't be because there's no true economically viable process to recycle or reuse or ship them off island. So that's my first amendment, Madam Speaker.
On the amendment, which is page 8, line 9, after the word unless, and page 3, yes, line 9, after the word unless, and add the words and economically viable. So on the amendment, no objection, so ordered. Senator, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when we think through the process of how this bottle bill is going to be implemented, and we talk about how many people are going to actually adopt the process of recycling. I did some real quick research as to how much of this recycling process do people eventually adopt, and how quickly do they adopt to actually recycling. And one of the most recent articles in the papers kind of came to mind with the Guam Solid Waste Authority and its receiver, GBB, with their current issuance of all of the recycling bins, right? So they're rolling out these programs to encourage recycling, and they're going to make it, and one of the biggest challenges to recycling is the convenience side of it. Is it convenient for someone to do? And if it is, then they're probably more prone to actually participate. Right now I recycle, but it's kind of a pain in the butt because I have to store it in my garage for some period in time. I collect them all, and then I go take them over to Pyramid Recycling or any one of the other recycling centers that will take it, and I don't get anything for it. I just drop it in the bins, and I do my part to help protect the environment. But when you think about the programs that the Solid Waste Authority are getting ready to roll out, what impact is that going to have on this bill? Because now it becomes convenient for the consumer to just put it in the recycling bin, right? It's 5 steps from my doorstep. Yes, I can get my redemption value if I save them and I take them down to Harmon, but if you live in Talafofo or in Arahan, what is the challenge of taking that up to Harmon to get your redemption value. By the time you get up there, you spent more money in fuel than you're going to get back to redeem your bottles. So it's going to become more convenient to just put it in the recycling bins. And so when you put it in the recycling bins, right, and you're not getting the redemption value in there, you start to ask the question, have we engaged the receiver or solid waste, the Guam Solid Waste Authority, on whether or not these programs are going to coexist, or whether one's going to kind of defeat the purpose of the other? Because you're achieving what the true intent of this bill is, and that's to somehow take those recyclables out of the waste stream, and not let it go to the landfill, preserve the lifespan of the cells. But I'm not sure that I see any reference to coordinating with the Solid Waste Authority on that program, because that's going to have a huge impact. It's going to be so much more convenient now for people to recycle, and I'm not sure if we proceed with this, we're going to be charging all of these deposit fees, and really they're never redeemed. And you're attempting to drive cost into the equation in order to accomplish the goal that now the Solid Waste Authority has provided a solution for, and it's taken that product out of the waste stream. And so, now what we're doing is we have the solution in place, but we still have all the costs associated with the bottle bill. And so, I have my concerns as to whether or not that's just adding some sort of tax to it and just driving costs into the consumers, and that's not what we should be doing. But that gets me on my next thought, and that's what happens to all of these unclaimed redemption fees. So, for example, let's just say that out of 100 people, 80 people redeem their bottles, and that those redemption fees go back. What happens to the other 20% of the redemption fees? And I didn't use those numbers just out of pie in the sky information. We actually see that in a lot of the states that have implemented, there's close to 20% of these redemption fees go unredeemed. And that kind of drives the next question. If 20% really goes unredeemed, and I don't know if that's going to happen on Guam, but now we have this additional revenue or additional money that's sitting in this fund, up to 20% of all of these redemption fees, and we're adding in handling fees, and we're adding in administrative cost fees. So it's kind of as though we've now created a mechanism to fund an entire department, and that's all being subsidized by the consumer. And so when you put that and you put that side by side with what Guam Solid Waste Authority is doing with the recycling program, now we really have to ask ourselves, are we now truly driving a lot more costs into the equation by not only charging the fee, but also having a separate solution that's really accomplishing the goal of what this bill had intended to accomplish from the very beginning, and that's to reduce the waste stream to the landfill. And so, Madam Speaker, the issues that I have, once again, with this is, and I want to sit down now and listen to my colleagues and get their take on it, so that I can make sure that I'm not missing some of the salient points of what they have to add. But if the true intent is to recycle the product, is to reduce the waste stream to the landfill and extend it, what portion of the bill has included the Guam Solid Waste Authority's current recycling program into it, and whether or not there's maybe opportunity to remove some of the associated fees other than the redemption fees, considering that you're going to have this unclaimed redemption amount that maybe would be better spent by going towards reducing our tipping fees in general, as opposed to just funding the management and administration of the bottle bill. If maybe we, and I'd like to hear what my colleagues have to add on this, is maybe we can take whatever those redemption fees are, or maybe a percentage of it, and use it to somehow lower our tipping fees across all the municipal solid waste that our consumers are currently paying, that might be a benefit too. But remember that it's coming at a tax. Everybody's being charged it that consumes these bottles, and whether or not they're considering the list of approved containers and the amendment to the economically viable recycling or reusing of these recyclable containers, whether or not there's even enough money in there to accomplish the intent. And if there isn't, then I understand the administrative fees as well. But when we go back to the administrative fees and the handling fees, there's no real limitations on what it will be. There's absolutely no reference to any kind of forecast numbers as to what we anticipate those fees to be. And we really need to be responsible to the community as far as whether or not, let's say that we decide those administrative fees are 25 cents. You're adding 25 cents to a dollar beverage. I'm not saying that that's what it would be, but we can't just, in its current form, there's no limitation on it, and there's no real development of what those handling or the administrative costs will be. And so those are my concerns, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Senator, so you're not moving your second amendment?
Oh, thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes. Let's see. The second amendment, Madam Speaker, is on page 5, line 7. And on page 5, line 7, and I'm not sure I have the right bill here, because when I read my bill, it doesn't. Oh, no.
On
I'm
line
sorry.
7,
I'm sorry. Here we go. On page 5, line 7, Madam Speaker, if we can insert the following, just so that we're clear. Thank you. Yeah, I have it. Okay. Yes. Under item A, page 5, line 7, every deposit beverage distributor shall pay the department a deposit beverage container fee on each individual beverage container manufactured in, and I'm just reading from the current bill, in or imported into Guam that has been identified by the department. And in the bill's current form, we had made a reference to this list of approved containers. And so I just want to be clear that we're talking about the same thing in this section. So I'd like to add the following language right after department, where it reads, on the list of approved containers. And that's just to ensure that we're not just talking about all recyclable material, but what has specifically been identified and put on this list of approved containers.
And is it also your intention to delete as recyclable?
Yes, and after that, just deleting as recyclable and requiring a deposit. And by deleting that section and referring to the list of approved containers, it kind of makes clear that we are referring to just those that are on that list of approved containers, as opposed to any item that's recyclable.
Okay. On the amendment, no objections? So ordered.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the main motion, is there anyone who would like to speak on the motion? Senator Nicholas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I very much appreciate the presentation of the retiring speaker, who touched on something that also has come to my mind. This recycling program that the receiver is rolling out, I'm very fortunate enough to actually have been given one of those new containers and to be able to actually begin engaging in the process of recycling in my home. What we did in my house was I moved the container right up next to a window, and what we do is every time we have anything on the approved products that can go into that container, I get it, I gather it up, I walk over to my window, I just open it up and I just toss it in. And it's been amazing. My 15-gallon trash bag now lasts me 2 days, maybe even 2.5 days, as opposed to 1 day. And it's really cut my waste down a great deal. And what makes it very, very effective is, I don't have to separate the items. I'm just able to say, okay, this is a a can of soup that we ate, we wash it out, we dump it in. This is a cardboard box that was attached to something that we purchased, we just toss it in. And it's working. In my household, it is working. And if this program continues to roll out to the remainder of our community, and every household does its part to begin engaging this new service, I think it's going to be very, very effective. And with that, with respect to the bill, I share the same concern as Senator Limtiaco. If we're going to be rolling out this program, which is already well underway and is working in my household, how are the two going to relate to each other? And if we're going to move forward with this bill and it's going to add cost to those very same products that I'm already able to recycle with the existing program that the receiver has rolled out, then I'm just going to be paying more for something that I'm already able to recycle anyway. And then the thought occurred to me, well, okay, so I'm taking these items, I'm tossing them into this bin, the receiver's going to get it. Are they going to be able to separate it out now and take all of those things on the approved list and then truck it up and go collect the deposit from it? And then go have a new revenue stream for their own operation from my own efforts to recycle based on what it is that they rolled out. And there may not be necessarily anything wrong with that if we include provisions in the bill that would require that any revenue that they are able to generate from that kind of activity shall go to offset the tipping fees that are assessed to our people. So those are the thoughts running through my mind. I don't have an amendment at this time to proffer for this particular bill, but I just am concerned as well about the impact of passing something that's going to raise costs on items, and I believe that it would be a justifiable reason in order to encourage recycling and reduce waste on Guam. That's something that's a shared concern for everybody, not just in this body, but throughout our island. But because we already have a program now that's also rolling out, I do worry now that we're just going to be adding on a new layer of expenses to the same kind of service. And if that new layer of expenses isn't going to offset the expense of my trash services that I'm already paying for, then why would I be paying double for the same opportunity to recycle when the current opportunity is working very, very well right now in my home? So just as with the retiring speaker, I'd like to hear from the other members of the body and their perspectives on just how this well-intentioned bill fits in with the recycling program that's currently being rolled out and is already at people's homes today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. Is there anybody else? You want her to answer some of your questions, or when she's going to close, then she'll? Okay. Is there anybody else who would like to speak on the motion? There being none, then I'll invite the author to close.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my colleagues who stood in support or spoke and shared their concerns to this process and to this bill. And I want to share for the record that I too believe in my heart that there's some answers that need to be clarified. When the bottle bill, the Beverage Container Act of 2010 was passed, we were still dealing with issues of closing lids on opening lids on, closing the order dump, trying to see what we could do to clean our island and make sure that our environment is cleaner, safer, and greener. And with all the concepts, and with all the programs that were out there, I can say that when we finally, after many years of getting this Beverage Container Act put into place, it was the concept for doing that, was to reducing our trash, making sure that the longevity of the cells that were going to be utilized in Ledzan, that there was a greater lifespan. But Madam Speaker, as you know, EPA said there were some impediments and some obstacles to making sure that full implementation of this bill or of this law could be passed, because there were still some things that needed to be tidied up, to the effect where we had legal counsel, not just from Guam's EPA, but from our council, from Region 9, from Hawaii and California, coming together and working with Guam, saying, okay, these are the concerns that have been happening right there, but these are best practices based on the mistakes we made that you guys can probably look into. This legislation was created because we need to move forward. These amendments need to be put in. And I'm going to share with you, just listening to the retiring two speakers, I know that when the council comes together and does the rules and regs, and everything, the MOUs come into place, that when those rules and regs are done, that it's going to come back to this August body, and well, at least for me personally, I'm going to look through it with a fine-tooth comb, because I want to make sure that as we look at the concept of taking our trash and giving it one positive avenue of turning it into a commodity, bringing revenues to our consumers who are going to practice and are going to be able to recycle, I want to make sure that all our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed. And just after carefully listening to the presentation here today, I too said this needs to be worked very closely with all the stakeholders. But that doesn't stop us from making sure that we start the program, because we haven't started the program. I'm not saying that we haven't had good programs out there. Like, I'd have to give kudos to the iRecycle program, Madam Speaker, because even with this bottle bill or this Beverage Container Act not being fully implemented, iRecycle, through the leadership of one lady, Peggy Denning, and a group of students from all the public high schools and some of the private schools here in Guam, have come together on a lot of the activities that happen around the island, and literally go out there and make sure that they bring the awareness of recycling, reuse, recycle, and make sure that we have that mindset to make sure that we protect and our environment, that we clean our environment, that we make Guam a safer and healthier community. So, Madam Speaker, with that being said, this legislation here is a continuation of what needs to be added to make sure that the council and the committee come together and put the rules and regs in place. And after that is done, then as that finalization comes through, it'll come back to this August body. But I just want to say I respect the concerns. I want to share with this body that as these rules and regs get initiated, get put down in hard copy, get sent down this way, that as the author of the legislation and the law that was passed in 2010 or early of 2011, that I too will be looking closely to making sure that our consumers do not get that double penalty, but that the true intent of reusing, reducing, recycling, and making sure that our island is greener and cleaner, that those would be the points that would be brought to the forefront. I do want to make several amendments, Madam Speaker, and the first one would be a technical in nature, and if I can, if I'm not mistaken, it's on page 5, line 10, and to correct that section 44105E, the correct citation or section to that would be D and not E.
On the amendment, page 5, line 10, the section of the statute is from the parenthesis E to the letter D as in dog. Got it? No objection, so ordered.
The next amendment, Madam Speaker, is on page 10, line 5, and lines 14 through 19.
Okay, let's take
That
on.
amendment would be, the administrator shall administer to the funds and shall encumber all amounts available in the fund as expeditiously as possible for the purposes of assisting and encouraging recycling and recyclable materials and implementing the Guam Beverage Container Recycling Act of 2010 pursuant to Section 504C of this article.
Well, so the amendment is to delete the words on line 5, page 10, the administrator's discretion under. That's to be deleted. Is that correct, Senator?
Yes.
And then everything would remain. So on that motion, then to delete the words, the administrator's discretion under, Senator Respicio, you recognize?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to rise to quickly thank the mover of this amendment, who is also the main sponsor of this bill, because by deleting the words administrator's discretion, it's really significant in that we're making sure that the administrator administrates the fund, the recycling revolving fund, and if she had decided to leave these words in, then that would have meant that he would have had unfettered access to any amount of money in the fund, and at his discretion, he can reprioritize whether it's going to be the abandoned vehicle program, the tire recycling program, and this bottle bill program. So I just want to thank the mover of this amendment and really emphasize to our colleagues the kind of manner in which she's been wanting to move this whole program forward, in recognizing that we need to provide the kind of rules and regs, and once these rules or regs are established and adopted by the legislature, by deleting the words the administrator's discretion would require that he still implements the fund pursuant to whatever rules and regs the legislature will be adopting. And so I thank Senator Barnes for the amendment, and I ask our colleagues to continue to recognize the manner in which she's trying to take a very complicated and complex program and doing whatever we can and she can legislatively to move it forward. And so I stand in full support of the amendment.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Senator Limtiaco.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I just want to, if the author would yield to a inquiry, as pointed out by Minority Legal Counsel and in myself reviewing it, I am concerned that, when we're talking about the redemption values, right, and these deposit fees going into the revolving recycling fund, I believe, when we're talking about the redemption values, when you look through the hierarchy of what the fund is going to be spent on, what happens if the prior to priorities, and as listed in the amendment, right, and it exists in the existing law, the first priority is junk vehicles, tires, batteries, waste oil, white goods, appliances. Second priority is the paper, cardboard, plastics, and glass. And then the third priority is other recyclable materials as determined by the administrator. I'm concerned that what happens when the redeemed value, right, this is money that we're telling our consumers, you're going to get this money back, guaranteed, because we're specifically saying that this portion of the redemption value you have to get back. We don't get to keep that. We get to keep the handling fees and the administrative cost fees as well, right? What happens when the first priority that we pursue and we execute on the first priority, What happens when there's no more money left? What happens to the redemption fees? How do we ensure that the consumers get back what we're legally obligating by putting it on those bottles, their right to get their deposit fee or the redemption fee back on those deposits?
Senator, do you yield to the question?
Madam Speaker, he's brought up a very good point, and if I can just get legal counsel's take on this, it'd take 30 seconds, just so, because I've got another amendment to address Senator Respiso's concern, but if I can just take a 30-second recess
And it's
so I can get
to-
the answer.
Okay, recess. an amendment being proffered by Senator Munia Barnes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, thank you for giving me the time to address the amendments and the inquiry that was done by my colleague, the good senator from Tamuning, right? And with that being said, I'm going to ask that
From San Diego to Mooning.
in San Diego to Mooning, okay. I'm going to ask that if we withdraw that amendment,
We're going to withdraw the amendment that you proffered, which is page 10.
right,
Okay, so we're going, on that motion then to withdraw the amendment, which is on page 10, lines 5 and 14 to 19. No objection,
And then-
so ordered.
then move to delete or replace section 10 with a new section 10,
Wait, what page are you on?
which is page 9.
On
Line
page 9, we're going to
Delete
delete
section 10.
section 10. Senators, page 9, section 10. The motion is to delete that section, and that would be also following the next page,
Right,
page 10, from lines 1 to 19.
yes, ma'am.
Okay, is everybody clear with that?
Let's take it out and replace it.
Anyone would like to discuss or object that deletion of section 10? None, and it's to be replaced with a new section 10, so we're getting rid of it first, it's gone. The new section 10,
It will
everybody
read-
should have a copy.
It would
And
read
go
like
ahead
this,
and
Madam
discuss.
Speaker. Section 10, the Board of Directors of the Guam Environmental Protection Authority shall within 120 days of the date of enactment of this act into public law submit to the Legislature in Guam via a duly adopted resolution a proposed operational plan that shall include the budget request for the implementation of this act and that shall address the deposit fees and tipping fees as it relates to the recycling program activities implemented by the Guam Solid Waste Management Authority or the receiver appointed by the United States District Court for the District of Guam with the intent of reducing the overall cost to consumers.
Okay, on the amendment, no objections? Oh, wait, 1 second, is it the Guam Environmental Protection Agency? Did the name change to authority? EPA. I've always known it to be agency.
Okay.
Senator Espicio?
No, if I'm not, the Guam Environmental Protection Agency.
Okay, that's what I thought.
If that could be a technical change, Madam Speaker, from
Yes.
authority to agency?
So from authority to agency to make sure then that technical correction is made. On the amendment, which one? The agency or the? Okay, on the amendment, Senator Ogden.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I just want just a clarification, please, from the sponsor of the amendment. I certainly stand in support of the amendment in terms of submitting a budget request, but is it a request or a budget plan to expend the resources? And I say that because if you go back to the pre-existing Section 10, the law already authorizes the administrator shall administer the fund in accordance with certain provisions, and to fund and to identify first priorities, second priorities, third priorities. So that authority is already in place, and my understanding is that we wanted the budget to be presented for consideration by this body. So I just wanted a point of clarification, Madam Speaker. If we're looking at the existing law, the authority is already there to expend the resources that are available for recycling, and once this is implemented, then they have that authority. So it says, shall include the budget request for the implementation of this act, or should it reflect a budget plan? Because we really already have provided, or the legislature has already provided that authority to expend the resources.
Senator, do you yield to the question?
Yes, he's right. The budget plan would be for the budget plan is for the additional personnel that would be needed to run this program through EPA. Because the original authority already
wait.
sets.
Senators, you're looking at this, then the language that you see on Section 10, which is the what's in law right now. We're not deleting that at all. That remains in the law. But
Yes, Madam
the
Speaker.
new Section 10 is only a new Section 10 for this bill.
Right.
So Senator, then whatever you've just alluded to is exactly what exists in law.
No,
And
no, no.
hasn't
I
been-
understand, Madam
yeah.
Speaker. I reflected on that because by law, the Guam Environmental Protection Agency Administrator already has the full authority to expend the resources. So that's why I question whether it would be a budget request or a budget plan for the implementation of this act. It really should be a plan because
Wait.
we are not receiving a budget request when in fact the authorization in existing law already provides for the expenditure of all the resources that will be generated as a result of this bottle bill as well as the other recycling funds. That's the only issue I have, Madam
But
Speaker,
it's-
because on the
It's
sideline,
both. It
I
says
recognize-
operational plan, which includes a budget request. Yeah, in order to request for a budget, you got to have a plan to support that budget. That's why it says there, a proposed operational plan that shall include a budget request.
okay, I understand that component, but isolating the previous or the pre-existing Section 10, that authorization is provided, unless there's another section of the law that requires the GIPA come back to this body with their expenditure plan. Because if that's the case, then this would be consistent with that.
Yes, this is what this is.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. So on the amendment without any objections, so ordered. Senator, you still have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, again, I just want to
What about
extend my
section-
sidus masis to my colleagues for helping me strengthen this bill. And with the attempt of this Bill 108 moving forward, we hope that that the Board of Directors will come back with that given time, with their rules and regs, so that we can truly implement the Beverage Container Act of 2010. Mind you, Madam Speaker, this is 3 years since 2010. It's now 2013. But as we look at cleaning our island, protecting and preserving our environment and making sure that it's cleaner and greener and healthier, I know that this August body has made a commitment to making sure that this plan goes through. So I ask that my colleagues please give it a favorable consideration so that we can finally get this program moving forward. Senator Moss.
So on the motion then to send Bill 108 to the third reading file without any objections, so ordered. On Bill 194-32, Senator San Nicolas, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to place 194 on the third reading file and be given the opportunity to speak.
And can I just double check, is it as introduced?
As
or-
introduced, Madam
As
Speaker.
introduced, okay. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, when I think of our island and the future and what we hope to accomplish as a people, I see so much opportunity and so much potential. And all of this opportunity and potential lies in our greatest renewable natural resource, and that is our people. And everything that we can do as a government to further empower our people to take their skills, their talents, their hard work, their ideas, and to turn it into something that is going to help grow Guam, every opportunity we can create to make that happen is a good thing for Guam and for our future. Right now, our economy is entirely driven and entirely supported by the hard work of our people. Our people go to their everyday jobs, they open up their shops, they go and they do whatever it is they need to do in order to earn a living, and in doing so, they keep our economy moving forward. When it comes to opening up a business on Guam, the opportunities for business ownership are many, but the requirements to actually get your business open create a lot of hurdles that cause people to either hold back or abandon their ideas of business ownership entirely. One of the greatest obstacles to business ownership on this island, Madam Speaker, is the access to capital, the ability to get money and actually open your doors. Right now on Guam, if you want to open a business, you either got to pay for it out of your own pocket, otherwise, unless you are fortunate enough to have a benefactor, such as a family member or a friend, or to engage with a partner who has money, or to have them contribute money to the opening of the business, or the only other way to actually go out and get money is to borrow a loan from a bank. And as a former banker, I can tell you that for a new business, that's a very, very difficult thing to do. Because a new business does not have an established track record, it does not have established cash flow. Banks are more likely to lend to established businesses than new businesses. And so in order for us to unlock this potential of our people, and in order for us to encourage business ownership and business development by our people here on this island, I think it's time for us to take the necessary step to encourage the greater maturity of our financial markets so that they can further support the development of businesses. Right now, our banking industry is very, very healthy and very mature. As a former employee of the Bank of Guam, I've gotten a good dose of history over how in 1972 the Bank of Guam opened its doors, and today it's $1 billion bank, a local bank. And that growth had a direct correlation, the growth of the Bank of Guam had a direct correlation to also the growth of the island. As we improve the access to capital and as we improve the ability for businesses to grow and expand, we grow our economy. And so the next step in the development of our capital markets, the ability for businesses to access money and grow, is for us now to figure out ways to get our people to invest local. We've had a very strong buy local campaign that is continuous and ongoing, and it is a good thing for Guam. But it's very, very difficult to invest local. If I had $100 in my pocket and I wanted to go out and invest in a small way in a business, it's very, very difficult for me to figure out how to do that. There'll be a lot of challenges in being able to assess the quality of the business. There'll be challenges in figuring out exactly how I'm going to be able to own a part or a portion of that business with whatever small amount I may be able to invest. Even if you're a larger investor, there's still so many challenges in being able to go out and engage businesses to invest. And that's on the investor side. On the business side, if you wanted to open up your new business, it's very, very difficult to go out and find investors unless you know the right people or you have the right friends. And for a lot of our people, our everyday people just like me, I've had so many business ideas. And I've gone through writing up business plans and having all these ideas of how I could turn this into something that could work. But one of the biggest obstacles that I ran into, Madam Speaker, is the access to capital, the ability to get the money to get my business going. And I always said to myself, man, if I just had a way to reach out and share this idea or these opportunities and this plan with investors on a general scale, I would probably be able to bring in the capital that I need to get started. Unfortunately, our financial markets locally have not matured to the point where we're able to sustain that or even offer that to our people. And so I've introduced bill number 194-32. And what this bill does is it takes the federal regulations that create exemptions in the offering of securities, stocks of corporations, the exemptions that allow for you to be able to do that at the local level, and it basically opens the door for us to be able to create a local securities exchange here on the island, an intrastate securities exchange. And this bill is very, very broad-based. It has very, very clear lines that make sure that we're complying with the federal regulations as we move forward, but all it does is it requires the Guam Economic Development Authority and the Insurance and Banking Commission to work hand in hand in the promulgation of rules and regulations to actually get this exchange started. And it gives them 180 days to do it, a lot of lead time. And it gives so much flexibility to the point where they can sit back and they can figure out, okay, how do we craft this within the framework of the federal regulations that are outlined in the law. The flexibility is important, Madam Speaker, because this kind of new undertaking is going to require a lot of collaboration and a lot of planning, and that's why the lead time is so important. And that's why the flexibility is so important. But ultimately, what I'm hoping that this bill will develop into is an exchange where new businesses can go and register their corporations, register their local corporate shares, and get access to investors that are kept on a registry within the Guam Economic Development Authority to be able to match up new businesses with investors who are interested in investing in those businesses. And this may not only benefit new businesses, Madam Speaker, but also existing businesses. If there is an existing local corporation on this island that would perhaps like to offer some of its stock to be able to pay down some of its debt, to increase its cash flow and reduce its interest expenses, that's another mechanism by which they can go out and actually raise capital to save money and streamline their own cash flow situation. So this bill is very near and dear to me, Madam Speaker, because as a former financial advisor, I've always stepped back and you look at these very large companies in the States, and all of them that are publicly traded have stock that is traded with investors at the national level. There are federal regulations that allow us to establish this at the local level. And I, for one, will be a very interested local investor to provide capital to local businesses, to help them to grow, to help them to expand, or even to help them get started. But in order for us to match investors with businesses and ideas and our people with the capital to get started, we need the mechanism in place in order to regulate it, in order to make sure that there is uniformity in the information that's provided, in order to ensure that when there is actually a transaction between company and shareholder, that there is proper registration of the shares and that there is proper tracking of ownership and everything else that comes with it. And so Bill 194-32 will be the spark, a very small spark, that will hopefully be just enough to get this kind of a system started so that our people can begin realizing their dreams of getting their businesses started by being able to offer their shares to the public, the local public. And it will also be a way for our people to not only buy local and support local businesses, but invest local as well. And you know, as for me, nothing will give me so much gratitude as to see a business that I invested here locally flourish and thrive. Or to be able to do so to an existing business and know that, hey, you know, this business started here on Guam, they issued some shares, they raised capital here locally, and they were able to go off to the States and open up a PROA franchise that has now landed in California and is starting to sweep across the United States. You know, that is the kind of potential that gets unlocked when the access to capital is facilitated and when we allow for our businesses to be able to access money to grow. And all of us here would love to see our economy grow. We would love to see more jobs created. And in order for all of those things to happen, we need to take the next step in the development of our capital markets and go just beyond banking and actually start getting our people investing. So I ask my colleagues to please join me in getting this spark ignited and help me get Bill 194 passed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Welcome, Senator. On the motion, Senator McCready.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the retiring Speaker for Bill 194. You know, this is a very, very difficult bill, and I have a lot of concerns, not so much with the bill, but more with the process and the regulations. You know, the hardest thing when you own a business or when you attempt to own a business is taking that idea that the retiring Speaker had just mentioned and turning that idea into a profitable business. And the next hardest thing is to get somebody to agree to give you the capital that is necessary to even not just to guarantee that your business is going to be sustainable, because most businesses fail within the first 3 years, but to enable you to just start a bare minimum business. I know we have some businessmen in here, and the businesses I own all started from the ground up. And I'm sure that's most of the stories that you hear. I mean, small business is the backbone of not just this island, but this country. But I'm not sure how we would regulate it, and on top of that, I'm not sure if the model that we're following is the model that's going to work. I don't think this is a one-size-fits-all type of model. Guam is a very unique place. It's people, the island, and a lot of big companies make a lot of money off of Guam, and then they leave when they're finished making all that money. And not a lot of the money stays here. So while I understand the concept, and it's a way for small businesses or possible small businessmen or women get a way to fund their business, but I just don't know how we would regulate it, because what happens then if an individual who gets money, who gets an investment and takes that money and leaves? I mean, so when you talk about the regulations and you talk about how we're going to model it, I'm not sure if the model legislation to a certain jurisdiction is a fit for this island. Now, am I a proponent for small business, and would I like to see every idea get funded and that capital be afforded to these small businesses so they can realize the dream of owning a business? Absolutely. But this is going to take regulations. This is going to take, I don't even know who would reg. So maybe I could ask the question, if the author would yield, how would we regulate this, and who would regulate it, and would the regulation process of this bill cost us money, and who would pay the
Senator, do
money?
you yield to the question?
Sure, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the whole bill, pretty much the entirety of the bill, is to authorize the development of regulations. And it authorizes the development of regulations in two entities that are to work together. The first is GITA, which is our Guam Economic Development Authority, who I believe should be primarily responsible in developing the regulations that are going to come with the establishment of this kind of an operation. And the second entity is the Insurance and Banking Commission, which has oversight over the issuance of shares and the tracking of those items. And those two entities are both required. We're not talking about creating a model out of legislation. We're talking about having two entities work together to promulgate rules and regulations to get something like this started. So for the question about who's going to regulate it, that's exactly what this bill is intending to do, establish those regulations so that we can begin to get started in the process of making this kind of an opportunity available to our people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Senator McCready, do you have the floor? Was he able to answer your question?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Speaker. That does answer the question. So my next question, well, I would like to find out, would this be another entity that would be a capital for a small business? Are we looking to grow the small business market by offering, because I believe the retiring speaker and the author of the bill said that one of the hardest things to do is get the banks to agree to loan you the money. And sometimes there's family members out there who would invest in your business. So would this be another way for a business owner who has no prior business experience to get capital funding for his or her business?
Senator, do you yield to the question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, the rules and regulations that are to be developed will specify exactly how the whole process will work, and these rules and regulations won't be created in a vacuum. They'll have to come back and be adopted by the legislature. But the way I envision it, I mean, if I could be so bold as to kind of put my own creative touch on these rules and regs, which I believe will be better handled by the Guam Economic Development Authority and the Insurance and Banking Commission. But ideally, what we would like to have is a standard for existing businesses, a standard for new businesses, and a standard for the variety of shares that they may be interested in issuing. So for example, if you're a brand new business and you want to go out and you want to create a corporation and issue shares and raise capital in order to get started, we should create rules and regulations particularly for the new business type of entity. And those rules and regulations should also include all the necessary disclosures to any potential investors with regards to the experience of the business owner, whether or not they're putting in any of their own capital. And it should fully disclose that this entity is a brand new business from a brand new aspiring business owner. And then with full disclosure, the investors can step back and they can say, yeah, I kind of like that idea. I think I can put up some capital for that. Or they can say, you know what, I'm not interested in any new businesses. I think I'm only going to look at the rules and regs and those offerings that are available from existing businesses. Or investors cannot be interested in the program at all. You know, you can entirely choose as an investor not to invest in anything that this program puts together. But at the very least, we'll be having the rules and regulations established so that you can look at these different entities. You can be appraised of what the risks are, as the rules and regulations should stipulate. And then you can go out and make your investment as an informed investor. And this will then allow for new businesses to get started. It will allow for ideas to actually turn into realities. And it will allow also for small-time investors. Like myself, I'm not one of the, I don't have a tremendous amount of money where I can go out and just throw money into all these possible ideas. And I can probably, if you're offering your shares at $10 a share, I can probably buy 5 today, you know. But when you add up all those things, you bring together the power of the people, the power of the community, and all of a sudden, 5 guys just like me is $250 to invest. 50 guys just like me is $2,500, and 500 guys just like me for that brand new idea might be the $25,000 you need just to get started. You know, Senator McCready has mentioned on multiple occasions that he started his business on $500. You know, if he was a new business owner and he needed $5,000, he could have put together a program, put it through this process, and gone out and found 10 guys just like him to go ahead and invest in his business. So on another note, he may have gotten started with $500 and it may have taken him so many years to finally build and grow, but what if he was able to put his idea together and present it to potential investors, raise more capital in the beginning? He might have been able to get started bigger, faster, and grow at a more rapid rate, create jobs faster, get more people employed faster, pay taxes faster, and contribute to the functions of this government. But all of that would have been more facilitated if he would have been able to go out there and find investors. You know, not all of us are lucky enough to be able to find a $500 business idea that we can grow into something. But if we can pull together the power of the community through a program that our government is going to be able to create and regulate, I think it'll be a very, very good thing for our people. And I hope I answered the question.
Senator McCready?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the retiring speaker. And I thank you for remembering the $500 business thing. I only have $200 left now, but you know, hopefully we can work on that. But anyway, my intention for the question was to get the intention of the author. I know the initiative of the bill is one thing, but I really wanted to get what his intention was and where he wanted to go with this. I also wanted to ask one final question. You know, when I looked at the committee report, I didn't see, it could be all oversight on my part, but I didn't see Gita's testimony or the banking testimony. So if I could get that, or if that was an oversight on my part, I apologize, but I haven't seen that in the committee report online. So that would be my final question, Madam Speaker. So thank you very much for answering the question.
Okay. On the motion, is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Senator Lim Tiaco, you recognize.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I just want to echo the sentiments of the good senator from Molokai. I'd like to see the Gita's testimony because this is a direct impact on Gita. And I do want to commend the author. This is the type of stuff that, no pun intended, our generations need to start looking at different ways to spur economic activity on Guam. And I applaud him for being forward thinking, but I'm not sure that we've adequately thought through the bill. And I say that because I definitely hope that this is not a channel for new businesses to start, because I've started my own businesses as well. My family's been in business ever since I was in junior high. I was picking up trash or changing tires or doing something for the family company, and it's difficult to get the banks to lend you money. You need to have a solid business plan, and if you have a new idea with a business plan and you can't even get past the bank to get funding, I definitely would not want to see our Manumco people out there being approached to invest in this new idea. And we see this happen all the time, even for sophisticated investors. You take a look at the Bernie Madoff case, right? You see what happened with that whole Ponzi scheme. These were sophisticated investors that got duped into buying into these different type of Ponzi schemes that he was getting at. And once again, I still applaud him. I think that it's definitely something that we should look at. But I want to see Gita's input into it, and I want to also understand. I do believe that these are still federally regulated, in terms of fraud. I think the federal bodies that would investigate the securities fraud, the federal agencies are still, even though this is proposing an interstate securities exchange. I believe that the federal regulations that enforce the securities fraud still would be in charge of enforcing it. But this is definitely something that is ripe for fraud, especially with investors that don't necessarily understand the business model. And so, I want to once again reiterate, I hope this is not the avenue for a new business startup to somehow generate funds, because if we can't even get a bank to loan us startup funds and then go to an initial public offering, that's not a business I want to invest in. No matter how grandeur this business startup idea sounds, I want to see that whatever they're selling, whatever they're marketing, has some sort of market potential before I want to put my money into it. And the banks are very equipped to do this. And if they won't even lend this new startup money, I definitely know I won't be purchasing in it. And so, those are some of the issues that I have with it, and it just, the one thing that I don't want to see happen is some of our vulnerable that may not understand this, and it's very easy to sell people on this great potential for business opportunities. I want to see how they're going to be protected from it, because it happens all the time. You get I don't know if anybody's been called by the Microsoft people calling about their problems with their computers and trying to get you to give you your credit card information over the phone. But these are the type of things that are kind of ripe for fraud and abuse, and it definitely has the potential. But and I know that it probably could be developed in the rules and regs, but I don't see the Gita testimony, and I'm just curious to see as well what they had to say about it. I don't see it on the committee report. Oh, okay. Could we take a 1-minute recess, Madam Speaker, just to...
Okay, there, he will. So, Senator San Nicolas?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We did not include, we do have a letter on file from Gita, and we did not include it in the committee report. And we did so for a very specific reason. First of all, we've tried to communicate with Gita early on. They did not come to the hearing, and the letter that we received was just yesterday. We received it on the 5th of November, stamp received, but they dated their testimony October 11th. And in their testimony, they say, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to provide Gita's comments, but they weren't there. And then they go through items here that we wish we could have addressed at the committee level prior to the bill getting to this point, but they never communicated with us. And you know, I was very bothered by it. I didn't want to bring this up here on the session floor and talk about my disappointment with Gita dating something erroneously, turning it in the day before, and then now being asked why it's not included in the committee report when the reality is that we have a 10-day window for public comment, and I'll include whatever needs to be included. But, you know, with Gita, we already went through in the Gita issue, we went through a process previously with documents that didn't look right. And this document, when I received it, did not look right. You don't date something October 11th right as if you were there and then turn it in on the 5th of November when you dated it the 11th of October. So that's the reason why it's on the committee report, but I can make copies and circulate it to the other members. Gita's concerns that they listed here, again, was troubling. They said that they wanted to be referred back to committee, and they said that if they had been given the chance prior to introduction, Gita would have welcomed the opportunity to provide input in the drafting of the bill. And so it creates a picture as if they should have been consulted in advance, and that they weren't, and that they weren't given the opportunity to have a dialogue about it. But they didn't come to the hearing. They didn't turn in their testimony until just yesterday. And so for this language now to be a part of the official committee report was just very troubling to me, Madam Speaker, not only with reference to the date and the way the language was written. One concern that they did have was with respect, and it was a legitimate concern, and I can address it here on the floor. They were concerned about the term sale or sell that appears to involve the need for licensed securities professionals to properly handle the exchange of securities. But if you look at the bill, and I really hope that Gita looked at it a little more closely, we have the definition of sale or sell, but we don't mandate the selling or sale of anything to any entity. The reason why we included the definition was that in the event that rules and regulations were promulgated that required the selling of anything, they would be promulgated within the limitations of what we spelled out in the definition. And the reason why the limitations were spelled out there in the definition is because that definition is very key to making sure that it complies with the federal exemption that allows for the offering of interstate securities. So if I could go ahead and have copies of this letter circulated, but again, I'm not going to be including it in the official committee report because it was beyond the deadline for the transmittal of testimony. It was erroneously dated October 11th and submitted November 5th, and it is written in a manner as to indicate that, or as to imply that they were present at the hearing when in fact they were not, and they did not submit any testimony within the necessary deadline. On the, so I guess that would answer the question with regards to the Gita testimony. On the question, was it a question with regards to fraud, or was that just a statement that I could cover in my closing?
Yeah, no, that wasn't a question. Just the, just wanted to bring that to the forefront of it. In reviewing the committee report and in the questions regarding Gita, the main question regarding Gita's testimony is because it will have an impact on their operations, and so it wasn't to solicit exactly what they're either for or against it, but it was specific to another portion in the committee report that the fiscal note requirement, and I do see in the committee report that there's a waiver for fiscal note because how are we going to fund or pay for whatever additional manpower is going to be needed, if any, in order to incorporate this new mandate to set up this the Guam Interstate Securities Exchange Program. And so that was kind of where the question was going. And I do see in the committee report that there's a waiver of the fiscal note requirement and the impact of what that might have on the agency. So if the author would yield to a question as, have we taken a look at what the financial impact may, if any, might be on the operations of GITA, and if there was a reason for the physical note waiver?
Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the bill calls for the promulgation of rules and regulations, and it specifies who's responsible for promulgating those rules and regulations. It doesn't ask for any new entity or any newly existing body to promulgate these things. It tasks it to the existing authorities who would be responsible for promulgating something like this. So the reason why, to my understanding, the fiscal note requirement was waived was that this mandate to promulgate rules and regulations, we require the promulgation of rules and regulations all the time that involve the entities that are required to be are required to contribute to the promulgations of those rules and regulations. So the reason why the fiscal note was waived was this mandate should not have a cost in terms of going out there and developing these rules and regulations. And if it in fact does, they could come back to us and say, hey, we're putting these rules and regs together, but we need to spend this money for this or this money for that. But if we're going to be requiring an appropriation to promulgate rules and regulations every single time, I don't know how we're going to promulgate any rules and regulations in this government, Madam Speaker, because we have so many boards and commissions, we have so many governing entities, and their jobs are to promulgate rules, regulations, and policies. And part of the whole purpose of GITA is economic development. And the whole intention of this bill is to facilitate the free flow of capital between investors and businesses to grow the economy. The Insurance and Banking Commissioner's responsibilities to promulgate rules and regulations in this bill also don't require a fiscal note, because it is the basic function of the Insurance and Banking Commission, one of its basic functions, is to regulate securities within the territory. So if they're both basically supposed to be doing their jobs, and we're requiring them through a mandate to go out there and do their job in this particular area, I don't see why a new fiscal note is required when it comes to the promulgation of rules and regulations, and that's why I believe the fiscal note requirement was waived, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. I just want to thank the retiring speaker, because that helps clarify his thoughts on it, because if I read the physical note waiver correctly, it actually was waived because BBMR, I guess, didn't provide a response to it. Not necessarily that they didn't feel it had an impact on the GITA operations, or whether it's just a matter of course that they're doing their job, because I employ several people as well, but when I add a new task to it, I expect that eats into their workload, and there is a cost associated with it. I don't know what the impact of that cost would necessarily be, but we can't be naive to the fact that it doesn't cost anything just because they're that's what they're supposed to do anyway. Any new requirement or task order you put on anybody is going to have an impact on it. But once again, I think we're headed in the right direction, and I do have my concerns as to whether or not this should ever be viewed as a way for new businesses that get off the ground that aren't even in operation. If that's a way for them to raise revenue, I would have concerns as an investor with that. I would want to see a business at least perform for a certain amount of time before I throw my own money in it. But the other side of it is just whether or not how we're going to educate people on, and obviously we don't have to be babysitters, but, if I come up with a great idea and then I go out and solicit people for their money, I guess I could do that now and try and sell them something and not deliver on it. And I just want to make sure that the listening audience knows that, that we should be at least thinking through some of these concerns, because it does have the potential, like anything. Any business can start up tomorrow and kind of sell you into something that is not a good product anyway. Similar to this, I could have this great business idea and sell you on some shares and then take off to the Philippines the very next day. But that can happen in any environment, not just because of what the good author is proposing. But, I'm just wondering, I don't want to see a good idea, fall to the wayside because we haven't done the due diligence or given it enough development to see it through. If it just needs to be tweaked a little, we can keep it going and keep the bill alive. But if we're going to head down the road of sending it to the third reading file, and it comes to a fate where it's not what the author intends, I'm wondering if whether or not we need to just pull back and send it back to committee and just work on it and just tweak it a little bit, get everybody's input. Just because the testimony was received late doesn't mean that we keep going. We may want to just take a step back. This could be for the good of our people, and to let the fate of the bill lie in whether or not testimony was early or late. I'm not sure that that's the right way to conduct the business of the people. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, on the motion, before I recognize the mover, Senator Uggan.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I certainly have an appreciation for some of the comments and the exchange in the discussion in regards to this particular proposal. But Madam Speaker, just looking at how industries are started and also looking at some business opportunities that are created, this legislation allows for the conduct of Guam Interstate Securities Exchange. And it's, to me, extremely general in nature. First provision is obviously the respective divisions or definitions, and then it allows for the creation of the program within the Guam Economic Development Authority, of which the promulgation of rules and regulations consistent with the 1993 Federal Exchange Act is required. Now, if this is something that after perhaps the review of this particular industry, whether in fact it's applicable to Guam, comes in and they say, okay, there's absolutely no opportunity, business opportunity here, then I would understand that, because they would have to identify what some of the restrictions are. But we're looking at legislation that could conceivably promote economic opportunity here in Guam and create additional business opportunities for individuals who call Guam home. And that's why I look at this and I say, okay, I question, that's why I have an appreciation for some of the dialogue that has taken place, because they're very pertinent questions. But in the same token, here's an idea, GIDA, called Guam Economic Development Authority. What do you think about implementing a program to see if in fact there are businesses or business opportunities out there that could apply to Guam? And then, if you see that in fact there's some strong semblance of interest, then promulgate the rules and regulations, establish a program, and let's see if we can get it off the ground. I would hate to, Madam Speaker, to see legislation that is as general, I don't want to say generic, but it's as general in providing the creation of a program, and the promulgation of rules and regulations provides as much flexibility, where Guam Economic Development Authority will be tasked with the establishment of the program, and Revenue Tax will be tasked with the establishment or the promulgation of rules and regulations as it applies to taxing the participants in this program. I would hate to see such a proposal not be endorsed or supported by members of this body, only because small ideas sometimes grow into big opportunities for businesses out there. And if there's even an inkling, and I take it that the sponsor has a strong sense, based on his work experience, that there may be an opportunity here knocking for Guam investors to be able to participate in, then I certainly would like to not only stand in support of this legislation, but let's see where it takes us after the development of the rules and regulations, after the creation of the program, and see if in fact there are actual businesses, not only in Guam perhaps, but perhaps in the region, that would like to invest in such a program, so that in fact it can provide jobs for our people and bring additional tax dollars. So I stand in support of this measure, Madam Speaker, recognizing that yes, perhaps additional dialogue could have taken place, perhaps additional restrictions, but the way I see it, if it's viable in nature, and I give certainly kudos to the sponsor of the legislation. But if it's viable in nature and it may present business opportunities for businesses on Guam or in the immediate surrounding region, then certainly it's an opportunity that I would like to explore. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Welcome, Senator. On the motion, is there anybody else who would like to speak? There being none, then the author can close.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, first I'd like to address a comment. I was going to rise to the point of personal privilege, but I'll just address it from the beginning. This document is not being included because it was late. It's being included because it's not factual, it's unclean. It's dated and it's written as if they were present and they weren't, and that's not the way they should be doing business. And I didn't want to include that in the committee report or make an issue out of it because while it's not the right way to be doing things, I want to focus on that. I want to focus on the good things that we're trying to bring to our people. And when we talk about good things, one day I was not too long ago, I was driving into work, and I imagined, what if cars weren't invented when they were? And what if somebody was trying to move forward the invention and the legalization of the automobile today? And I kept playing through the scenarios in my mind. I was laughing to myself because it would probably never happen. They would probably say, what if somebody got into an accident? Or what if somebody didn't, what about the safety features of the vehicle? Or what about this? Or what about that? I mean, the way we do business today in government has become almost obstructionist to the progression of society because we get so caught up in the what ifs, we fail to see what we're really looking at. And the automobile, of course, is a critical part of society. It's not going to go anywhere. It's always going to be regulated. It's always going to be improved upon. And I'm just grateful that our Lord in His wisdom inspired Henry Ford to invent it in the 1800s and not in 2013. Because with this bill, Madam Speaker, all it does is requires the development of rules and regulations. It was brought up in earlier discussion, what about fraud and what about going out and frauding Tan Maria? There's nothing to prevent somebody from starting up a corporation right now, taking their shares and going around and selling it. It's actually an unregulated environment. And they can go around, they can sell it for whatever they want. And there's no requirement for them to register the ownership of the shares. There's no requirement for them to report that the shares were actually sold. There's no requirement to show that the cash was actually deposited and actually used for its intended purpose. It's a completely unregulated environment. That kind of fraud can happen right now. What this bill does is it sets up the system through which not only we can regulate and protect against that kind of fraud, but we can also develop it in a way that's going to be regulated so that it can build investor confidence, so that I'm not going to be scared about someone knocking on my door and saying, hey, you want to buy 10 shares in, Mike's and Nicholas Corporation? Of course, right now, you're going to look at that and you'll be like, well, I don't know you from anybody else, and how do I know that what you have to offer is something that's going to be legitimate? But if we promulgate the rules and regulations, if we set up the system by which these kind of transactions can take place, then we can have confidence in investing in our local businesses, investing in our local people, because there will be a system in place to regulate it. And there is none right now. And that is what this bill does. All it does is require them to promulgate rules and regulations in order for it to get started. And I was very disappointed when I read the letter from the erroneously dated and late and misrepresented letter from Gita. I was very disappointed because economic development is their primary function, and the ability to facilitate the free flow of capital and get businesses started by our people is the basics of economic development. Gita has been so focused on issuing bonds and digging us into debt and giving out loans. Well, what about the offering of securities? What about matching investors and businesses? What about making the ideas and the dreams of our people to get their business started? What about making those things come true? What about developing the economy that way? And you know, when you talk about how I won't invest if a bank won't loan to you, let me share with you the banking perspective, Madam Speaker. Banks have very strict lending standards. Very strict lending standards. And the reason why they have very strict lending standards is because they get audited based on the loans that they give out. And if a brand new business, regardless of how good the idea and if they dotted all their I's, crossed their T's, came in and went in and asked for a banking loan, it'll be very, very difficult. And some of my experiences, Madam Speaker, in the banking industry, I've seen people go out and take a personal loan. I'll never forget this one personal loan that I processed. It was for $20,000, and they put down for a wedding. And I was so touched. I was like, wow, these guys are going to go get married. And we went through the due diligence on the lending side. They met all the criteria. We gave them their $20,000 personal loan to go get married. And about a month later, I was driving, and I saw this new business open up, and I went in to check it out. And the new business that opened up were the applicants who turned in their personal loan application for a wedding. And I was surprised to say, hey, when are you guys getting married? And they said, you know, we're going to get married eventually, but we really wanted the money to get our business started. And I said, why didn't you guys go and get a business loan? And they said, well, the criteria on the lending side was just way too strict, and we weren't able to get through that way. Talk about fraud. I mean, technically, that might have been a fraudulent application on a bank loan, you know. But the point is that if you do not already have money, and I'll be very frank, if you don't already have the right friends on this island, if you already don't have businesses that you can tap into to help you out or to help out your family members, it's very difficult for the common man to go out there and get the money they need to open their business. Very, very difficult. And what this bill will do is it will require the rules and regulations to be established so that the common man, the everyday Joe, can go out there and get his business license and form his corporation, register his shares with whatever form is created through this rules and regulations promulgation, and through a regulated environment, go out and make his idea available to invest in. It just seems so basic to me, and it seems so attractive to me to be able to empower our common people to turn their ideas into reality, to be able to grow our economy, to be able to match everyday investors with everyday business owners. And for Gita to take almost a disinterest. I wanted them to be at the public hearing, I really did. And when they weren't, I wanted their testimony. We even had an email sent from us saying, oh, we're looking at it, we'll get back to you. And I really hope that this isn't one of those situations where politics is getting in the way of true progress, because to take this step, to promulgate these rules and regulations, and to get this started will be a very, very good thing for our people. And if I need to take my name off of it and put somebody else's name on it in order to get it passed, I'll do whatever it takes. Because this is about the future of our island. This is about the opportunities for our people. This is about growing our economy. This is about helping out the everyday man and woman, the everyday investor. And it's about creating the regulated environment to be able to do it with confidence. So anybody here can tell me whatever it is I have to do, but this is something that I believe is an idea whose time has come. Let's open it up for our people. Let's develop these rules and regulations, and let's get these dreams turned into reality in a fair and regulated environment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
You're welcome, Senator. So on the motion then to send 194, the third reading, file without any objections, so ordered. We're going to take a brief recess. Legislature is back in session. Senator Frank Ogden on Bill 195.
Thank you very much. Good evening, or good afternoon, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, first and foremost, I want to thank you for allowing at least a discussion on Bill 195-32 COR to commence. Madam Speaker, I'd like to move for Bill number 195-32 COR as originally introduced and as entertained in the public hearing, that it be placed in third reading file for consideration by the body and obviously with discussion.
Okay, Senator, so. Yes, I know. So, Senator, you'd like to speak? on it?
Yes, Madam Speaker, I was going to initiate some of my statements, but I understand that the members of the body do have a particular gathering that they need to be a part of, and they need to participate in, and they need to prepare some information. So at least we have recognized that Bill 195 is the first item on the agenda, first thing in the morning. So I'd like to yield to your consideration in terms of recessing until tomorrow morning. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Yes, Senator, that is definitely, since we've started and recognized you on Bill 195, and although we're going to recess, it is the first bill on the agenda tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. So we are recessed.